It has been way too long. We are back. Best ball season took maybe a pause, but it is back. I guess it technically never went away. Some of you sickos have still been, doing all these in-season drafts every single week, but now it's time. The playoffs are coming. I'm starting to get legitimately excited. I've been really not even super closely monitoring my teams. I see a lot of people, a lot of you guys, a lot of really sharp people on Twitter that, have done a lot better job of kind of tracking their teams and everything up until this point. And I have kind of trying, especially after we lost our Lord and Savior Darrington Evans and Trey Lance, it was pretty obvious that Trey Lance was never going to play. I tried to divorce myself from seeing the ebbs and flows of my winnings every single week. But obviously now, there's been, so much awesome discussion in the Discord, even for the last few weeks already, leading into the playoffs. I feel like we have a, fairly clear idea of, who our quote unquote league winners are, how to kind of project moving forward. We probably have a pretty good idea if we went team by team on all of our teams, which ones are basically locks to get into the playoffs and which ones, maybe still have a chance. Like you could have a third place team, that in theory you're like, oh, this one's in third, but it's, still 100 or 120 points back. So it doesn't really have much of a chance. You might have first place teams that are probably going to fall out, so I think we have a pretty good idea of kind of where we stand at this point heading into the playoffs. And so I think it's a perfect time to kind of start talking about these teams, these players, these combinations of players. Somebody mentioned in the chat, and it was a good idea that kind of inspired this stream, was to have you guys share some of your teams. I'm actually super interested. It's a long running joke, right, about sharing your teams and talking about best ball during the season and all that nonsense. But I'm legitimately kind of interested in who, what your guys' team looks like. Hold on. Now I'm trying to share my screen, and of course it's not cooperating. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. Share window. Let's try that. No, okay, not working. You can tell I haven't done this in a little while, huh? Gotta fix my Chrome sharing stuff. But if you have teams, I already saw a ton of you guys have posted some awesome stuff in the Discord already. If you have teams that you want me to kind of look at, I'm going to go through. I'm trying to share this, obviously. I'm going to go through and show my advance rates across all Underdog and DraftKings. And then go through probably a couple of teams real quick to kind of get the juices flowing. I got a couple of things, around uniqueness and different things I think we can talk about. But it'll just kind of be a free flowing conversation from there. Like I said, I'll share my, I'll show you mine and you show me yours type of a situation in this, in a much more appropriate manner. So let me get this darn screen share figured out super quick. This is not camera. Google, allow these apps. Okay. Gotta love this. StreamYard is not cooperating with me here today. Let's see if I got that fixed though. See if I can share my screen finally. All I want to do is share this darn we might be just going to you guys' teams here quickly. I apologize for the technical difficulties. So one interesting thing that I'll jump to this while I try to figure out these technical difficulties. If you saw, we had a kind of a really good Twitter thread the other day on kind of, it turned into this idea about uniqueness. It started with, I don't even remember what my original tweet was, but it started into this kind of like, how are we thinking about the playoffs at this point in time? Hey, there we go. All right, now I need to unshare this. We got her going. That's good. But this uniqueness idea, we started, myself, Mike Leone, and Madison Parkhill were the main guys that I remember. And I just happened to watch Madison and Leone did a stream yesterday, day before, on Establish the Run. That was really, really good. And they kind of talked a little bit about this whole playoff thing, right? And that's what we're here to discuss. So let me see if I can actually get this. Darn. Stop. Share. Oh my God. How is this not working? What a shit show this is. Absolute shit show. So anyway, we'll figure that out later. We're talking about this uniqueness idea, and I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. So it's difficult to have these conversations on Twitter. It's even difficult to have them like in Discord. There's a super, super long thread about how do we know inherently when we get to these playoffs, you guys have talked about this, we talked about it in Discord for weeks now. We know inherently we get to these playoffs and the entire goal is to have the best projected team, right? I want the team that has the most projected points over this, basically in every single one of these little mini DFS tournaments. Every single week, I want to have the best team, right? That's like where we start. JT, give me JT, give me Eckler, give me Cup, give me whatever. Give me Brady, give me Fournette. But then, we also inherently know that a lot of the teams advancing are going to have the same group types of players. So I would, in theory, love to have the team, that is also the lowest owned. And so is there any way to sort of manufacture some combination of those two things when we draft? And that's a very, very difficult question to answer, right? And I think in general, the answer is largely no. But how we talked about it, and I think there was a little bit of what happens on Twitter, people kind of talking past each other. But what I think is a maybe more important part of the conversation is I don't want all of my portfolio of players to be attached to the same other players. And so like, I'm not seeking out uniqueness. There was a lot of conversation about like, could you just take Jonathan Taylor second overall? Like kind of, I think taking the guy that, is in the market going 17th or 20th overall, taking them second overall is taking the search for uniqueness a little too far. I did personally do some things such as, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Devontae Adams, taking them second or third to kind of, but those were guys I was already taking at 5 or 6, in these drafts. So it didn't really change that much for me, but it was getting me, again, a little bit of different pairings with those guys. I think seeking out uniqueness for uniqueness's sake at the, in our most critical picks is something that is a very difficult kind of line to toe. You know what I mean? So what I think is I don't want all my Travis Kelce teams to have the same next couple of players, right? I don't want all of my Christian McCaffrey teams. I know he's obviously turned to dust. Derrick Henry, whoever was the league. I don't want all my Jonathan Taylor teams right now. right? You have X amount of Jonathan Taylor teams. You probably feel really good about those teams. You're probably advancing a lot of them. Cooper Kupp. I don't want them all to be the same. That's how you start to manufacture this uniqueness, and you're not even really seeking out uniqueness necessarily in terms of uniqueness for the playoffs. And so that's kind of how I think about it. I don't want the same stacks on all my teams, right? I don't want the same I don't want JT with the same quarterbacks. I don't want sometimes that a lot of the times that will naturally happen over the course of drafting 150 however many teams you draft over the summer. But when you stick super, super close to ADP, you're going to get a little bit of different combinations at the beginning, but not a ton. You know what I mean? And so I am a little bit cognizant of that, but it's not even as much so seeking out uniqueness as it is making sure that my portfolio makes the most sense, which in turn kind of starts to manufacture uniqueness for yourself, if that makes any sense. Yeah, we need to calculate what's the value of being unique. I mean, the difficult part is I don't know how you do that. I mean, I guess technically, if anything, we're absolutely underselling the value of being unique in best ball. If anything, we are underselling not having the same couple of league winners in these tournaments. I mean, the person Herzig who commented on this benefited specifically last year from this exact thing. How do you get a team with enough uniqueness and enough projection through to benefit from the variance of any one given week? And that's what happened last year, right? Or so Leonard Fournette just scored 4 touchdowns this week. If some random person, Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison, whoever, I'm just throwing random names at the wall. If somebody like that is the one who scores 5 touchdowns in the last week and 3 people have them and you're one of them, the value of that is immense, just like the value of Kamara was being immense. It turns into a DFS tournament, right? If every other team has Cooper Kupp, being unique away from Cooper Kupp is the most valuable thing you could have in that tournament. If everyone has Jonathan Taylor, right? I get he's the highest projected, but if every single other person in that 125 man field or whatever it is, if they all the value of uniqueness is insane. It's a super hot top heavy tournament, dude. You gotta finish top 25 to make 10 grand or something like that. It's crazy. And so unique, if anything, I undervalue it too. Undervaluing pure in a vacuum uniqueness. The issue is, how do you manufacture it? The issue isn't how valuable even is uniqueness. That's part of it for sure. But I think we've played, again, this is not DFS, but we've had small field DFS tournaments for years and years and years. We generally understand the game theory aspect of that. That's not solved, but it's been somewhat solved. But we know how to manufacture that uniqueness, right? Don't play X chalky player, leverage off of X chalky player, but we don't have those options in best ball. And so I think it's a two-parter in that we do want to understand the value of uniqueness, but we also want to figure out, is there even a way for us to manufacture it? And I don't know if we can. I don't know if we can, but I do know I want to find a way from within my portfolio to develop, the ability to create that uniqueness, if that makes any sense. And you're not, I guess, if you draft AJ Brown on every Christian McCaffrey team, that could still turn into uniqueness. But when I was posting that stuff on Twitter, I wasn't even necessarily thinking about how do I go about getting uniqueness into the tournament? I'm going about how do I manage my portfolio the best way? To hopefully allow me to take advantage of that. I don't want all my Jonathan Taylor teams to look the same. I would like to get this, if he truly is the guy you have to have, right? I want to have a bunch of different guys around him, not the same guy. I don't want the same second and third round pick with Jonathan Taylor, the same 5th round pick with Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, some of the nuance of drafting will be figured out on its own, but I do think there are smart ways that we can go about that. Particularly, you get that like when you're picking first or second or something like that, the 2-3 turn, the 4-5 turn are always so similar that you run into that. And then you run into the fact that you can't have certain stacks, right? We talked about that in the offseason with like Christian McCaffrey. If Christian McCaffrey was the true league winner, you couldn't get Cowboy stacks with him. Not with CD and Amari, not unless you reached. But like we all know inherently you wanted Cowboy stacks, and we all know inherently that you wanted CMC. But if you just stuck to ADP and didn't manufacture that, unique blend of players, you're not going to have that team. And there's no real reason other than this construct of ADP that we shouldn't have, those pairings of options together. Yeah, we definitely don't. So there's so many parts to this. It's such a fun conversation. It's such an interesting thought experiment. Hold on. There was something else too. This is also true. I was trying to pull up. I'm going to keep going to try to get this darn, apparently I've forgot how to use the internet in the last few weeks of not streaming on RotoGrinders. I got somebody that does all this fun stuff for me. Now this is not even working. What a shit show. What an absolute shit show. Let me see if I share this, you guys are going to listen to me talk like a boomer. Absolute disaster. Pause. All right, we're going to have to come back for me sharing some of these teams because I don't know what's going on with StreamYard not cooperating. But we'll just talk through some of this stuff. And then we'll come back. I was planning on doing another one of these on Monday or Tuesday. We can push the kind of going through the specific teams and going through me sharing some of those on Monday or Tuesday. We'll get to that. But the uniqueness thing, great conversation. So let's finish that up first. Very easy to manufacture uniqueness. I don't know that's as it's very easy to manufacture uniqueness without giving up substantial value at the beginning of the season and hurting your advance odds. I don't know that that's true either. I think taking a guy who goes 6 picks later, we're seeing this play out in real time. Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 1. Jonathan Taylor is the running back 1. Austin Eckler, whatever. If you took those guys 5 picks ahead of ADP, I don't think that matters. I think we're very much so tethered to ADP at the beginning of drafts as it pertains to like a handful of picks, right? If you're taking guys multiple rounds, so like when I'm talking about uniqueness, like you can manufacture uniqueness, but that's like uniqueness isn't valuable in and of itself. Uniqueness in a smart way is valuable, right? In DFS, uniqueness is valuable so long as you are not giving up so much projection. Like anybody can manufacture uniqueness. When I'm talking about manufacturing uniqueness, I mean it in a way that you're not giving up projection. And I do think we are so tethered to ADP at the beginning of drafts when someone please tell me what the real true difference between Justin Jefferson and DeAndre Hopkins was. And one went 12 picks before the other guy. Or Calvin Ridley. We all liked Calvin Ridley. I know his unfortunate situation is a little bit more unique. What was the difference between Jonathan Taylor and, pick some of these first-round running backs? In terms of their range of outcomes, we're seeing, right? Obviously, these are cherry-picked examples from this one small sample. But the point is, within a certain, there are, like, if you're taking Najee Harris in the first round, right? If you're taking CEH in the first round, we're reaching too far because those guys don't have that same level of projectability, Chris Carson, whatever. You're taking some of those guys. You take Honestly, probably if you took Cooper Kupp over, Tyreek Hill or whatever, that is giving up too much projection. But there's this delicate balance of finding uniqueness without giving up projection. And that's the story. That's it. I want to have the most unique teams I want to make the championship, and I want to have the most unique teams once I get there. How do I do that? And there isn't really an answer. I certainly don't have an answer as of yet, but I think it's a fascinating thing to discover. And the hardest part is I don't know that we're, at least not in the next few years, going to have a real answer, because you can't ever truly draw what you think you can draw from one season. That's the hard part. We can look back at last year and be like, okay, this is the skeleton key. Well, now look at this year. It's different. Every year is going to be different. And so drawing too much from individual season's results it's the most difficult part of best ball, but it's also what makes these conversations the most fun. Is we could argue about merit to just about everything, and we could argue against just about everything. And there's never a sample of data that can solve any of these questions. And then maybe by the time it does get solved, the market has adapted and adjusted, right? There will become a time, we talk about the running backs and wide receivers thing, there might become a time where the running back dead zone is not a real thing, right? Because the market becomes so efficient that the Mike Davises of the world are no longer dead zone backs. They go where they should go, right? Round 10 or whatever. But when they go in the 5th round, it's okay, they're only going there because everyone loves. But once the market becomes so efficient, which underdog is, it's obviously not there, but it's certainly trending much closer to that. Well, then the whole game changes, and all these these zero running back and running back dead zone conversations and stuff that we have don't apply. It's not applicable anymore. So that's that it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. Let's see. If I took them in the later half of the round, I would reach for Jefferson, AJB. If I took them 2 through 4, I would draft more ADP value, setting up more unique combos. That's the other thing. If you're doing one team, if you're drafting one team in one of these tournaments, right? Honestly, draft whoever the hell you want. But I would typically, I talked about this a lot during the offseason, I want to soak as much value out of every team as I could. Right? I want to be able to pick off. You can partially manufacture uniqueness in your portfolio this way. Is when that guy falls, just keep trying to soak up that value. Keep trying to get the random Kansas City stack when Mahomes falls to the 5th round. Get whatever when Dak's plummeting, right? Oh my gosh, so-and-so fell to the 8th round this time. Now I'm going to take him. And instead of doing it the opposite way. But I do think we're often too tethered to the early first 2 rounds, maybe 2.5 rounds. This year, about the first 2.5 rounds. And most of those guys are really not that different. Honestly, probably besides CMC, we could argue that there's what is the difference between most of those guys? I think that the tier, probably Kelsey in the tier of top elite wide receivers is maybe a little bit different, but I think it's super fascinating. It's super fascinating to. I do want to say this is not true, because projections are we know that they'll be wrong, but projection is a range of outcomes. It's not about just a one binary number. Projection is Jonathan Taylor. The projection is going to be wrong about him, but when you get both a floor and a ceiling from an entire team, 18 rounds or whatever, and you have the most loaded team across all of those guys, it's such a massive advantage that you absolutely want to have the best projection, if at all possible, right? But then there's other factors. I want correlation, right? And I want low ownership. And so how do I get all of those things? Is the fun kind of part of it. This is another one Justin brings up. The handcuff discussion is such an interesting one too. I remember talking about this with Davis Maddock towards the end of best ball draft season, where I think it's kind of like the ADP thing, but for so long it has been just assumed of how these things work, right? I've been against the handcuff thing. I basically didn't ever draft it. I still don't even know that I have a truly fully formed opinion on it. But there's reason, like, so look at this Zeke and Pollard thing. Look at this Dalvin, and Dalvin's gonna like come back for the playoffs probably, and Madison might have like 6 RB1 weeks and help get you there, and then Dalvin comes back. So there's so many different things that I want to be open to and have these kinds of like incredible discussions about, because you guys are coming at something from a different angle than I'm coming at it from. You guys are posing even different questions than I'm necessarily posing, or I'm trying to think about things differently. And like, that's the most like interesting part of all this to me as we now head into these playoffs. Yeah, so I think I definitely am probably not explaining this very well, and we'll get away from the projection and get into some of the playoff talk here in just a second. And I apologize for this not going quite according to plan, but such is life. So it's more whether you can wait to get the guy on your next pick. 100%. The problem is, that's why you don't take Cooper Kupp in the first round, because you don't need to take him in the first round. But there becomes a tipping point where, you don't know that person is going to be there. And then you have the element of a different combination of players within your portfolio, which also might be a little bit unique in the field, that you start weighing all these different factors. Like, I'm doing 150, right? I have it up here, so I apologize. I have 630 teams on Underdog and DraftKings. Across all 630 of those, every time I get X player, I don't want it to be with the next 2 players because I stuck to ADP, right? And so I also in turn don't want it to be just a handful of guys that are all similar, right? So you start to get into this thing that I don't want all the stacks to be the same. I want to be able to set up different stacks with those guys. Like, we're heading into these playoff weeks. Now, let's start to talk about those, because it's actually kind of a perfect lead in. So Jonathan Taylor and probably Cooper Kupp are the best, pretty much confirmed the best 2 like, elite options to have on your teams, right? If you took Cooper Kupp in the 4th round or whatever, depends on, he did get on Underdog probably up to the late 3rd, once we had the wide receiver mania. But I remember he was like a fit. I have some super early BBM teams, Cooper Kupp in the 5th round. And Jonathan Taylor, Jonathan Taylor, oddly enough, went the opposite way, right? He was probably about the 7th overall pick, 8th overall pick, and then he fell to the 2nd round. So anyway, you have an exorbitant amount of teams advancing with those guys. If you took a myriad of combinations of different players around those guys, right? So you have 10% or whatever of Jonathan Taylor out of, you're doing what I'm doing. You're drafting 600 teams, or you're drafting 150 teams in BBM. And so you have 10% Jonathan Taylor. So you have 15 Jonathan Taylor teams. I want to have is like the advance rate on those teams is going to be huge. You have such an advantage with Jonathan Taylor. So then how do I optimize myself for those playoffs? Right? This is the fun this is when we start to have this fun conversation. I'm trying to pull up the Discord as well here. And like, I want Jonathan Taylor teams, of course. I want Jonathan Taylor teams. Who doesn't? I wish I had more. I wish I had more Jonathan Taylor teams. But like, I don't. We all have what we have in terms of JT teams. And so then if you're advancing 10 Jonathan Taylor teams, I'm just throwing a random number because it's easy. It's easy math. Would you rather have, like, how do you want those teams to be structured? Right? What can help me best win in the playoffs with Jonathan Taylor on my team, knowing that I'm probably going to run into a lot of other Jonathan Taylor teams at each step of the way. And so this idea of uniqueness is such a fascinating one, because it's like you advance and you're going to play 12 teams or whatever. It's legitimately possible you could run into those 12 teams and, like, I don't know, 6 of them have Jonathan Taylor. And so if you advance that Jonathan Taylor team, how do you get an edge over not only the Jonathan Taylor teams, but also the non-Jonathan Taylor teams? Well, over the non-Jonathan Taylor teams, it's probably, you definitely have a projection edge, right? You have a projection edge because you have the best asset in all of fantasy on your team, also with a really nice playoff schedule. So he's going to project really well. But then, like, so they kind of like this idea we were talking about earlier in terms of having different pairings with my Jonathan Taylor. Like, I don't want all my Jonathan Taylor teams to look alike. And this is not an easy exercise to do. Hopefully, we're working on some tool stuff to help us. Spike Week is going to be building some tools this offseason to help us with these types of issues that we struggle with. But, like, who was on all my Jonathan Taylor teams? Because it doesn't have to be just my core players, right? Like I have more Antonio Gibson than I have Jonathan Taylor. RIP me. But I want to look at I'm on the clock. Jonathan Taylor is the best pick. Okay, so I take Jonathan Taylor. Then my next pick, I would love to be able to have up next to me, like, okay, who's all on my Jonathan Taylor teams? Because maybe this time, instead of taking, I would always take whoever. I would always take Allen Robinson here, right? Hopefully nobody has too many Allen Robinson teams. I would always take Allen Robinson here. But the last 3 times I took Jonathan Taylor, I took Allen Robinson. Well, I don't want Jonathan. I don't want all my guys to be paired up the same. So maybe now, I reach a little bit and I take Amari Cooper. I take Cooper Kupp, right? I take someone like that. I take Tyler Lockett. I reach a little bit to get one of those guys to start creating those pairings. This I do actually kind of agree with. It's all for fun. We're obviously trying to win money. That's the reason why we're talking about all this as much as we are. But ultimately, it's entertainment, right? So if you're not enjoying it, like I legitimately enjoy these conversations. I enjoy the strategy behind all of it. That's why I end up in Twitter threads with other very smart people like Leone and Madison and other people that were involved in that thread, talking about these kinds of things and talking to you guys. All right, so let's start diving into some of these questions. We talked about uniqueness and all this bullshit for long enough. Jack asked a great question. If you could swap JT in all of your advancing teams for someone else, would you? If he's 50%, if he's in 50% of advancing teams, and we look at it like a DFS tournaments, you probably wouldn't play a 50% rostered JT. That is a really fun question. So I probably haven't thought it through enough. I'm gonna try to like backdoor this. Okay, so in the final week where the money gets paid out, I would not want JT. Not that I wouldn't want him, obviously. I would want, the ideal would be to get it if he is 50% in that. I would want to get a non-JT team through, because if right, anything happens, he gets banged up, just has a bad game. Certainly, no one is expecting it, but shit happens. It's the NFL, and in this, the returns are going to be so massive if a guy like that fails and he's on 50% of the teams. I also think with a guy like him, so many teams, I think the percentage could compound basically. Because we know inherently so many of, let's just, again, use the example of Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp. They're such league winners, right? They really are. And freaking Fournette is creeping his way into that conversation as well. We have these guys that are like, just like lapping the field. Kupp has slowed down a little bit, but JT is like pretty much starting to lap the field. Fournette, from a value perspective, is probably doing that as well. That like, there's going to be a really, really large amount of those guys. And so then we know a lot of teams are going to get through with Jonathan Taylor. That's to the first, just advanced period, right? Because you only got to finish top 2. Like, a lot of JT teams are definitely going to be advancing. Same thing with Kupp. It's hard to kill a JT team. It's hard to kill Cooper. I'm sure I got some really bad ones, but it's hard to kill those guys, with just how bad, the top few rounds have been overall. If you hit that massively on that early round guy. So anyway, it's going to like compound, right? So I know I don't want to have him if he's 50% in the last week. And if anything, if he smashes throughout the entire playoffs, it's going to be like all JT. Like, it could be way higher than 50%. He could be him and or Kupp or both or some combination. Then you really want to start calibrating this stuff. What percentage of pairings of those guys get through? How many are JT and Kupp teams? How many are the same stacks? How many are the same quarterbacks? How many are maybe Travis Kelce blows up for the first couple of weeks, right? And you could absolutely have Travis Kelce, Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp teams. Do you want those teams? Sure, you want to get there, right? But then, like, if I'm totally optimizing, obviously, everybody always says, and I agree with this, even though I often push back, just get there. Chip in a chair, dude. Give me a 1 in a whatever shot at a million. I'm in. However, if I'm really truly like if I get to choose and optimize those teams, these thought experiments are fun. It's like Dalvin is a fascinating one, right? Dalvin is absolutely fascinating one. Is like, he's going to be hurt. He hasn't even been like, he's difficult because even when he's healthy, it's not like he's like having smash weeks, but we know he has it in him to score 3 touchdowns in a week or whatever, 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. Absolutely. We know that's in there. And we know he's had a bad year relatively for the number 2 overall pick. He's had a bad year. And now he's about to be hurt for the next couple of weeks. Probably back maybe for the first round. We're not even sure when he's going to be back, right? But like, how is it possible for me to be the only one that gets a Dalvin Cook team through? And now you're just like, I'll have Dalvin Cook. If Dalvin Cook beats JT, I have a leg up on those teams. Like it's not that simple. Again, I'm like almost always oversimplifying, but you get the point, right? Like, if I'm the one, all I need is this one thing to happen, and that gives me an edge, right? Dalvin Cook needs to beat Jonathan Taylor. And like, obviously, Jonathan Taylor projects better than Dalvin Cook does right now. We don't even know when Dalvin's going to be back. But months ago, we never would have said, oh, yeah, Dalvin Cook is a huge dog to JT. And he's a big dog now, but not that big of a dog. So I'd be happy to take that coin flip. I think 100%. I clicked the wrong one. So I don't know if that other one I 100% agree with. We'll see. In the finals, you really want to own the guys that didn't go up. Yeah, exactly. So how do you do that? Like, because you need your guys to score points in 15 and 16. But how do you advance without having all the same guys that everybody else has? It's such a fascinating kind of conversation. And so this is where the uniqueness thing comes in a little bit. And I don't know how you manufacture this part either, but I think it's mostly structure. I'm almost certain that the way to manufacture this, and I'll get to it in a second. The best way to manufacture this type of uniqueness, I'm almost certain, is structure. So this is not talking about weeks 15 and 16, but talking about guys maybe with super low advance rates. Let's take Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk has been maybe the worst 5th round pick, one of the worst, well, horrible, right? Terrible pick. George Kittle, his teammate, horrible. Who else? Odell, awful, right? Dreadful year. Claypool, bad, right? So there's these guys. How, like, I want some of those guys, particularly like Ayuk, maybe Odell, Claypool. I want those guys on my teams that advance because I know that their advance rates are going to be so low. And we know that they have upside. So that's not talking about Greg's point of weeks 15 and 16, but also how can I get to the part where either A, I have the guys that didn't go off in weeks 15 or 16, or I have guys that go off in weeks 15 and 16, but nobody else has them. And it's those guys. And so this is a different level of uniqueness, right? Basically guys who busted. Dalvin Cook. We just talked about Dalvin Cook. But Odell is a massive bust, absolutely massive bust. But if you somehow got Odell through on a team to the playoffs, well, now he's on the Rams. He can catch 2 touchdowns, of course. Claypool can score 2 touchdowns. Brandon Ayuk is about to play without Debo. Granted, Debo will be back, but who knows? Maybe Debo gets banged up again. Debo was another league winner. Now you have Brandon Ayuk going through, or George Kittle. And so it's kind of, so anyway, the structure thing. How do you get to the point where you can advance teams that have Brandon Ayuk? And it's all structure. If you structured your teams poorly, it's really hard to whiff on picks, particularly high value picks. If you draft structurally sound, so let's take the ones that everybody always wants to talk about: zero running back or robust running back. And you take your 4 running backs on your robust teams whenever you draft them, whatever, 4 in the first 6 or 7 rounds. You have so many wide receivers then, right? So let's say you 2, 4, 10, 2 would be your structure on underdog. With that, you take those. You might be able to, if you hit on Cup, you hit on Debo, you stacked up the Niners, hopefully you didn't pick Lance, but you hit Debo and you hit Cup, you hit Mike Williams, hit Kendrick Bourne. You can absolutely advance a Brandon Ayuk team through. You can advance an Odell team through. You can advance a Claypool team through. It's really not that big of a deal. If you structure your team poorly, right? You take some early running backs, you mix some stuff in, you take extra tight ends, even though you took Kelsey, you do some bad things. Then it becomes like impossible to get through that because you don't have enough bullets in the chamber to make up for where you missed. Zero running back. Right? Stephon Diggs has not been a total smash. I have a bunch of Stephon Diggs teams advancing because the opposite, the same, but the opposite. I have all this wide receiver firepower that he's doing enough to get in some usable weeks, but he's certainly not smashing his price. But I have all these elite wide receivers. And then you just hit on a couple, you hit on Henderson, you hit on Dillon, you hit on Fournette. I didn't hit on Fournette. I think I have 2 Fournette teams across 600. Best ball teams. Yikes. Big yikes. But you know what I mean? We talk about that all the time. Make up for, your lack of quality with quantity in certain spots. And then if you structure your, that's why people would always talk about these, like, I'm taking 4 quarterbacks. And I know some of it is a bit, but when you see these people taking 4 quarterbacks, or even taking 3 when you took an elite guy, this is how you give up the ability to create these unique teams in the playoffs, because you can't overcome the guys who fail, right? This is why we talk about winning through structure all during the offseason, is because we get to this point right now, we're 2 weeks out from the playoffs, and we want to talk about how the hell do I win the playoffs, right? How can I win the playoffs? Well, then we start to talk about the uniqueness thing, and it all comes back to structure. If you did the right things when you structured your teams, sure, you're going to whiff, dude. You're going to have misses. But the structure is what allows you to kind of sneak these unique combinations of players through. So let's see here.
It's even more compounded when you think about very low roster guys. Oh man, say Allen Robinson. Wouldn't that be something? An Allen Robinson playoff explosion. How owned do you think Allen Robinson will be? What advance rate do you think Allen Robinson has? Because a lot of the times you would have to have probably like definitely JT or Eckler, or I guess Mixon. Probably. Or zero. You could have a zero running back. You hit on a zero running back team and you get, Debo and Tyreek and Jefferson and that kind of stuff. Or Kelsey. You might be able to get in at Allen Robinson, but he's got to have like one of the lowest probably advance rates. But this is also true. Whatever his advance rate is, he smashes, and those teams are going to advance because they're, nobody has. It's such an interesting thought experiment to get through. Dalvin, two weeks of rest and then smash for the playoffs. He's a fascinating one. I have him. I tweeted about it. Super tilting. I don't know. You guys share any of these. Yeah, there's Hacker posted a Dalvin team that's alive. Dalvin is such a good one. But I posted about, like, I was really excited before Christian McCaffrey went down, but I was really excited I was actually advancing. Hold on, sorry. I want to get the exact number. I have 26 advancing BBM teams out of 108. So I only did 108 BBMs because I was focused on maxing the DraftKings stuff at the end. So I have 26 teams, and 9 of them have either Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook. And I was like, this is amazing. I'm getting through a team. They obviously don't have Jonathan Taylor. They obviously don't have Austin Eckler. I think there was a little bit of Mixon on those teams, but like, honestly, those teams have been crappy at running back, but you sneak that guy through, right? Now Christian McCaffrey is out, so the Christian McCaffrey teams are dead. But Dalvin is a really, really interesting one to think about having, and he's like almost like the synopsis of this whole conversation is like, would you rather have JT's projection? Of course. How much worse is Dalvin's projection? How much worse is Dalvin's projection than JT when we get to those playoff weeks? Probably not. You're giving up a couple points. 4 or 5 points in median projection, probably in ceiling as well. But like on any given week, would anyone be surprised if Dalvin Cook had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns and JT just said, these dogs are going crazy? Apparently they're also Dalvin fans. Somebody asked earlier in the chat, it's really funny. I should go back. When do the dogs make an appearance? And if you're 48 minutes in is the answer. 48 minutes in is there we go. when the dog's going to take part in the video, there they are. Jay White, yes, man, it's been a long time. So I'm trying to bounce back and forth between what is going on here? Allow these. I think I finally figured out my screen share. We'll see. Oh no, I can't because it's going to make me restart Chrome. Okay, let's get back to some of these questions. Structure and correlation. Yeah, so correlation. Another perfect thing to talk about with those playoff weeks. How many teams that are structured well enough to get, again, let's say Brandon Ayuk or Odell through. Odell also, who mentioned that? Jack said that. Odell is he's great leverage off of Cup. That should be my dogs are wrestling right next to me. They're literally wrestling. Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. So Odell is fascinating. Obviously you couldn't plan for like a Ram stack with Odell, but if you happen to sneak through, Stafford, Cup, Odell, that's pretty interesting. But the correlation thing is like, so how many of these teams do you think are able to, again, using the Odell or Ayuk or Claypool or something example, how many do you think that are able to get through that type of player, Allen Robinson, and then in turn have the correlation that you right. We know that we want stacks just in general, quarterback, wide receiver type stacks. Hold on. My freaking dog is like legitimately injured. So I've been taking care of his ass all week. He can barely get up off the ground, and he's over here apparently from sleeping all week. He's got a boatload of energy dudes on 3 legs trying to wrestle his brother. Absolute shit show, these dogs. So that's the correlation thing. I'm really fascinated to see what happens in the playoffs. It's like I'm a little bit of a sick fish, I want to win, of course, but you want to see some of these things play themselves out, right? It's like the correlation thing. How many teams you think are getting through that don't have, got naked Tom Brady? We know that people are stacking quite a bit, but then when you start to compound all these things that we know are edges, like how many are structured appropriately, like particularly structured appropriately to be able to sneak through Odell, sneak through Brandon Ayuk, sneak through whoever. Like it doesn't even have to be those guys. Sneak through Dalvin Cook, right? How do you get a Dalvin Cook team through? Well, you obviously get lucky on, your other running backs, and not even just like getting. It's the other thing people don't think about is like my highest scoring team. I think on Underdog, my highest scoring team on Underdog is not my best team. You just get lucky on sometimes the weeks when people score. It does have Madison, right? It has Madison and it has it's actually a anchor Joe Mixon team. So no Jonathan Taylor, but it smashed every wide receiver, right? I think Tyreek, Cooper Kupp, Debo, Mike Williams, just a Rondale, just an absolute smash of wide receivers. No, so this is draft. Anyway, not important. Smashed wide receivers. And the running backs, I was looking at it like earlier today, preparing for this. And I'm like, how the hell is this my highest scoring team? But then you start to like look through the weeks. Devontae Booker is one of the running backs. I think it's Madison, Devontae Booker, and like Chase Edmonds and Joe Mixon or something like that at running back. Like not good. But when you start to go through it, it's like, well, I just used Mixon's score every week. He's pretty much good almost every week. He was good. Then Madison's had, 2 monster games, and then he luck-boxed the touchdown here and there, right? Devontae Booker had usable weeks, multiple weeks while Saquon is out. It's like the way best ball points are scored sometimes can just happen to benefit a specific team. And it could happen you could have a team that you're like, holy shit, this team is loaded, right? I hit on, XYZ, and I got Madison coming up, or I got Pollard, I got all these things, but you're in 5th place and you're drawing dead just because sometimes the scores don't align. Right? Obviously, if you've hit Cup and you've hit JT, you've hit enough things, Debo, you're probably just advancing. But like, what if your quarterbacks got hurt? What if you drafted Ryan Fitzpatrick and Trey Lance? Like I have Ryan Fitzpatrick and Trey Lance teams, dead. What if you drafted Sam Darnold and Trey Lance teams? Sam Darnold and Justin Fields. You could have drafted Sam Darnold and Tua, who both, like at different points throughout the year looked like awesome picks, right? Tua just keeps cranking out 15 to 20 point games every week, which is pretty nice. Wish we had a little bit better ceiling, but like just keeps putting out usable weeks. But then he got hurt. He missed time. Sam Darnold was like the QB4 through the first month of the season, and then becomes even worse than old Sam Darnold was, right? And like that team at one point in time looked like that was going to be your best team, but now, because guys got hurt, it still might have been able to get through if Tua didn't get hurt, but you gave up so many points in the month that Tua missed or whatever. There's the nuance of how the points are scored is super fascinating. All right. Good, very good one. Metcalf, DK and Lockett. Especially Metcalf is an interesting one because like if, Metcalf was getting taken over, like Justin Jefferson. Hopefully people didn't take him over Jonathan Taylor, but he wasn't that, Joe, he was in the same range as Joe Mixon. He's the same range as Justin Jefferson. And those guys have just so far exceeded his production. But you get him through, and the Seattle ever figures it out. We know what his upside is. It's huge, right? Yeah, this is true. A-Rob teams are probably mostly paired with the first round busts. Yeah, since he was, early third round, which, in turn would be the early first round guys, which all of the early first round running backs are awful or hurt or both. RIP. RIP to Darnold. It was a fun month. I enjoyed posting Sam Darnold GIFs every game when he would run for another touchdown. In hindsight, it probably should have been a strong indicator that what he was doing was unsustainable when he was leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns. But damn, it wasn't fun at the time when he was one of my favorite late round quarterbacks. Indeed, on DraftKings, yep. That's true. I luckily, knock on wood, was able to mostly avoid the Allen Robinson thing. My obsession with CeeDee Lamb and the Cowboys led me to lots of Cowboys over Allen Robinson. All right, I'm going to try to hop in the Discord to see if there's any questions. I know you guys have teams. I'm going to save all. I'm literally going to take these, put them in a Google Slides or something, or PowerPoint or whatever, and save these teams, and we'll redo this kind of show. But it's a little technical difficulty. We've been off for a couple months, but I'm gonna go back and try to hit some more of these questions. My highest on wide receiver last night was fun. Let's see. Lots of teams. There was a question that I know that I missed. Biggest hits and busts, Kurt asks. Biggest hits and busts in your portfolio, teams you're most excited about, lessons learned, all suggestions. Okay, so I do want to talk about, I'm going to compare or pull together biggest hits and busts with lessons learned. And then we'll do the teams you're most excited about. We'll move that one to the beginning of next week. So obviously, Darrington Evans was my biggest bust. He's my highest owned player. And I don't really have any regrets. But obviously, that didn't work. I also took too much, but that was on purpose. I was doing a little bit of personal branding, drafting an exorbitant amount of Darrington. But I also think it's interesting, guys that are busts, that you actually wouldn't change anything about what you did. And I think that's a lot. I think my greatest regrets are typically in the guys that I did not take than in the guys that I did take. And maybe that's a little bit of stubbornness. I'm going to think about that a lot over the offseason and kind of try to really dig in on what, was good process versus bad process, good luck versus bad luck type of thing. But I think Darrington, everything that has played out, other than the fact that AJ Brown and Julio also can't get hurt. I wrote a piece about okay, let's think about these scenarios in terms of what if the unpredictable happens, right? Nobody was ever considering early in the offseason, Darrington's obviously ADP shot through the roof for a little while there. But what happens if Derrick Henry gets hurt, right? Because he never has. And so since it's not something we've seen, right? We've seen what happens when Zeke's out. We've seen what happens when Dalvin is out, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And so, but we haven't seen without Derrick Henry, really. And then not in this environment. Also because Darrington wasn't able to stay healthy. But then we saw, there was a time Derrick Henry was the RB1 by a lot. And Jeremy McNichols was the RB35 in PPR. Because he was still getting passing down work and stuff. And now look, Dontrell Hilliard, they had Dontrell Hilliard and Deontay Foreman, two guys not on the team even a month ago, both ran for 100 yards in a game, right? And so there was just so much juice to squeeze out of that backup situation. Obviously, I thought the best bet was Darrington, and it remains to be seen if that was true or not. So I could have been absolutely wrong, but I think the process of targeting that situation, that's the thing I'm trying to think about the most, is like targeting situations and archetypes of players, whether it be team situation or whatever, that can pay you off, right? And so the other one that I think about that's like both a hit and a miss in this super bizarre way is the 49ers. The Titans, the Darrington thing obviously became a big thing for me. But the 49ers, just an overall investment in the 49ers was like that was probably my biggest stand of the year. I just wanted all the 49ers. I didn't, Debo was my favorite pick, cost adjusted. Obviously, Lance is the quarterback, so he gets his share of ownership. But I wanted the 49ers. I feel good about that. It happens to be Eli Mitchell. Maybe there's a case that I should have taken, some Eli Mitchell in the last round. I think that's something I'll think about in the offseason. But like that stance, Debo is my second highest owned wide receiver. That stance led me to getting tons of Debo, right? Look at what Mitchell's doing. Obviously, that it's clear that never was going to be Sermon, but that could have been Mostert. I drafted a good share of Mostert, right? And I feel really good, honestly, about what Trey Lance would have done if he got in there. And so George Kittle and Ayuk have been bust, but Debo's been one of the best picks in all of fantasy. If you happen to extrapolate it over to Eli Mitchell. So it's this weird one where it's like, it led me to a bunch of whiffs, but it also led me to some league winners. So that's like kind of a good and bad thing. And I'm okay with that too. I'm okay with that approach. Antonio Gibson. I don't want to spoil. I don't want to talk. Well, we can talk about him on Monday because he'll have played. He'll have played on Sunday. Let's talk about him on Monday. But I think he has a chance here to be one of the guys that doesn't have a good advance rate, because he was like in a similar range to JT. I do have a couple from early in the offseason when I took JT in the first round with Gibson that I'm really excited about. But I think obviously JD McKissick is out this week, but I also think the schedule lines up real nice for Gibson down the stretch. And if there is anything potentially wrong with McKissick, I think he could be, this guy that's also low owned in these playoffs that, is smashing. Let me go through a couple of these real quick. Sorry, now the wife is vacuuming. It's just a shit show here. It's an absolute shit show. I meant to click this one. Drafting guys with high floors like Melvin Gordon. I think Melvin Gordon made a lot of sense in particularly in certain structures and when his cost got to a certain level. He was a little bit higher, and then the wide receiver mania happened. And he was similar to Lenny, right? I actually got a couple of Melvin Gordon shares in those times, and he's been really helpful on teams, particularly like zero running back teams, because he just gets it, and he never does anything super crazy. He's not like awesome, but Melvin Gordon could be another fascinating thing to think about. Melvin Gordon could be, if Melvin was only on teams that made structural sense for Melvin to be on, which I actually think is a lot more zero running back or anchor running back teams. If Melvin was only on those two, I think his advance rate would be massive. Problem is, not everybody drafts structurally sound, particularly as it pertains to individual players. You might draft structurally sound, but you might not draft the right archetypes of players. I mean, I make the mistakes too. It's not that easy. So that's a fascinating thing. Let's see here. No, it didn't, but it certainly that certainly doesn't hurt. I think that is about it. All right. So like I said, thank you guys for hanging out. This is a lot of fun to get back on. Apologies for the technical difficulties. I wanted to do kind of a review anyway, early next week. And so we can kind of see how Sunday plays out. And we will get back into this on Monday. I'm going to have all your teams saved, and we'll just start scrolling through some of those. And I'll go through my advance rates. I'll go through some of my teams and some of that stuff. And then we can talk about what happened on Sunday and maybe what has changed from maybe how we feel even today. So for my dogs who are losing their shit, for all of you guys, for my illiterate technological brain causing the technological issues, thanks to you guys. And we'll be back again on Monday, and then we'll get into a super like repetitive schedule for the next few weeks leading up to the playoffs. We'll do some playoff drafts, all sorts of fun stuff coming up. I'm excited to be back into it. Thanks, guys. I will talk to you later.